If you were looking for a story to make you scared of the dark again, to enrage you even, or to make you cry, this story might accomplish all three. It was sent to me from a user named Crayola Commander and is titled Marines vs. Skinwalker. If our boys in the military didn't have it rough enough, apparently sometimes they might come face to face with something that simply should not exist. A true story or otherwise. I'll let you be the judge. I got stuck with checkpoint duty after I screwed up my knee. It wasn't in combat, not doing anything heroic. I actually stepped in a hole during a night training exercise at 29 Palms. I felt something pop and spent the next 6 weeks on light duty, while the docs decided whether to med-sep me or let me finish my contract. They decided I could stay. Lucky me. But I couldn't do full infantry workload anymore. So they sent me to babysit a road in the middle of nowhere. It's called Marine Corps Air Station Yuma. But we weren't anywhere near Yuma. We were 40 miles out at the edge of the Barry M. Goldwater Range, where they drop bombs and shoot missiles, and generally blow the crap out of the desert. Our job was manning Checkpoint 7 Delta, a glorified guard shack at the access road, making sure civilians didn't wander onto the range, getting themselves vaporized. 4 of us rotated 72-hour shifts, 3 days out there, 4 days back at the main base. It beat getting kicked out, but Christ, it was boring. The checkpoint was a single-story cinder block building, painted the same tan as everything else in Arizona. There was an office with radio and security monitors. The bunk room had 4 racks, and the bathroom always smelled like bleach and piss simultaneously. We had a kitchenette with a microwave and coffee maker that got us more use than any piece of equipment in the Marine Corps. The generator out back hummed constantly. The nearest town was 30 miles south. The nearest anything was the horizon. Sergeant First Class Lawrence Dupree ran our little operation. 31 years old, career Marine. A black man from Louisiana who'd grown up with a Vietnam vet father and inherited that old-school military bearing. Everything by the book. His uniform was always pressed, even in the middle of the desert. We had to do radio checks every 4 hours exactly, and perimeter walks on schedule. He slept normal hours unless something happened, which it never did, and we 3 junior enlisted split the night watches. Lance Corporal Anthony Bautista made it bearable. He was 22, a Filipino kid from San Diego, and a machine gunner before they stuck him here with us. He was a funny guy, always doing impressions and always had some comic book crap to talk about. I'd known guys like him before, the ones who stayed funny because the alternative was letting everyone see they were drowning. He just extended his contract, even though he talked constantly about getting out. I never asked why. Sometimes you just don't in the Marines. Private First Class Michael Oshido was the new guy. 20 years old, Japanese-American, grew up in Nevada near some of the reservations. He was quiet and serious. He would read paperback novels during his downtime, usually something dense and philosophical. His dad had been a Marine too, but had killed himself when Oshido was 16. Nobody talked about it, but it was in his service record, and word gets around. He always looked like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Back then, I was Corporal Vincent Restrepo. I was 24, a Colombian-American from Miami, 3rd year in. I kept my head down and did my job, writing letters to my girlfriend back home, and I hoped this checkpoint gig would be temporary enough that I could make sergeant before my enlistment was up. It was sometime in fall when we started. The desert nights were finally cooling off, dropping into the 50s. Better than the 100 and teens of summer, but you still felt exposed out there, like the emptiness could swallow you if you weren't careful. At 2000, the night rotation would start. 3 of us split it, from 2000 to midnight, from midnight to 0400, and 0400 to 0800. 4 hours on, 8 hours off, round and round. Dupree slept through unless something needed his attention. The watch itself was really nothing. Sit in the office, monitor cameras, 2 pointing at the road, 1 at the gate, and 1 at our vehicle. We would check the perimeter every hour, and we had to stay awake. Most guys brought books or magazines. Bautista drew in a sketchbook. Oshido just sat there thinking, which seemed worse to me. First rotation was smooth. Too smooth. 3 days of absolute nothing. Bautista, though, kept us entertained. The second night after dinner, he did an impression of our company gunnery sergeant that had us all dying. Restrepo, he puffed out his chest, deepened his voice, nailed Gunny Harara's accent perfectly. You think your knee is an excuse? My grandmother had 2 knee replacement and she still ran a faster PFT than you. Even Dupree cracked a smile. Belay that crap, Bautista. Roger that, Sergeant. Bautista grinned, then shifted into our battalion commander. Marines, I want to talk to you about the importance of proper footwear. Bautista. Aye, Sergeant. But he was already doing his impression of Oshido after that, hunched over a book, deadly serious, and Oshido himself was trying not to laugh. It was good, normal, the kind of ball-busting that makes 72 hours in the middle of nowhere more tolerable. Then Oshido asked a question. We were sitting outside after dark, smoking. Dupree didn't smoke, but he let us as long as we policed our butts. The stars were ridiculous out there. No light pollution, just the Milky Way smeared across the sky, like someone had spilled actual milk. Anyone heard stories about this area? Oshido's voice was quiet. Bautista blew some smoke. What kind of stories? Just stories. Things people say about the desert. Dupree straightened in his chair, We're here to do a job, not tell ghost stories. I'm just asking, Sergeant. Well, don't. Dupree stood, crushing his water bottle. We maintain security, we follow procedures, and we don't start spreading bullcrap that makes people jumpy. Clear? Clear, Sergeant. Dupree went inside. Bautista hardly waited 30 seconds. So what kind of stories? Oshido shook his head. Nothing. Never mind. But I saw him looking out at the desert, into the dark, and I wondered what he'd been about to say. Night 2. I had the midnight 20400 watch. The witching hours, the dead hours, when your body knows you should be sleeping and everything gets weird and slow. I was sitting in the office, barely awake, reading a Tom Clancy paperback I'd read twice before. All I could hear at the time was the generator and the occasional crackle of the radio. The security monitor showed nothing but empty desert in grainy black and white. It was calm, until I heard footsteps. They were outside, on the gravel. I put the book down and listened. Footsteps, for sure. Very slow, trying to sound sneaky. They crunched across the gravel perimeter around the building. I grabbed a torch and my rifle. We kept them condition 3, no round chambered, but I could rack it quick enough if needed. I then went over to the door. I opened it quick, my light up. What I saw was empty desert and a barren road. The motion sensor light on the north side of the building was on, though, casting one pathetic circle of yellow light. I walked the perimeter, checking everything. The gravel had been disturbed, but then again, it always was. Wind, our boots, it was impossible to tell. The motion sensor light clicked off. Then it clicked back on. I then walked to the north side. The sensor was mounted 8 feet up. It was supposed to trigger on anything bigger than a rabbit within 20 feet. There, I found tracks in the dust at the edge of the gravel. Coyote, probably, I thought. A 4-pad print with visible claws. But it was big. Must have been one hell of a coyote, I thought. They were the size of my boot print, I swear. Curious, I followed them with my torch. They headed out into the desert, clear as day in the dust. And then they just sort of faded away. Had the wind swept them away out here? I stood there for a full minute, sweeping my light across the empty desert. I couldn't find any more of them. I went back inside and locked the door, checking the security monitors. There was nothing on the cameras, except some static, which was weird. They didn't usually have static. I rewound the footage and checked. Sure enough, the static began to appear right around the time I'd heard the footsteps. I sat there and thought, okay then. The following night, Bautista had the 0400 to 0800. I was in my rack when I heard him moving around the office, probably making coffee. The sun would be coming up soon, and Dupree would be awake by 0630 to start the day's routine. But then I heard Bautista say something. What the hell? I got up. Oshido was already sitting up in his rack, always a light sleeper. Bautista was standing at the front door. It was open, and he was staring at it. What's wrong? I asked. He pointed at the door. Claw marks in the dust on the door. Like a big dog had been pawing at it, causing marks and smears in the dust. Did you hear anything? I asked. I heard scratching. I thought it was one of you guys screwing with me. I opened the door to tell you to knock it off. He looked at me. Restrepo, these weren't here earlier. I examined the claw marks. 4 parallel grooves, each about an inch apart. On closer inspection, they actually dug into the metal a bit, enough that you could catch your fingernail in it. The hell? Bautista said. I looked up. He was staring at the top of the door, about 6 feet up, because there were more scratch marks there, dragging downward. Dupree came out in his PT shorts and t-shirt and saw us standing there. Then he saw the door. The hell is this? I don't know, Sergeant, Bautista said. I heard scratching, opened up, and found this. Dupree inspected the marks himself. I could see his jaw tighten. Probably a bobcat or coyote. Sergeant, Bautista pointed. These are 6 feet up the door. Dupree paused and thought for a moment. Maybe vandals, he finally said. Before we started this rotation, focus on the mission. I'll report it to facilities maintenance. He went back inside. Bautista and I looked at each other. They weren't there yesterday, he said quietly. I did my perimeter walk at 0500. I would have seen it. I know. So what the heck did that? I didn't have an answer for him.
This holiday, Verizon is helping you bundle up incredible gifts and savings. You'll get the latest phone with a new line on My Plan and a brand new.
The last day of the rotation, we loaded into the Humvee for the drive back to main base. Dupree drove, and I sat passenger. Bautista and Oshido in back. I think we were all tired. None of us talked much. And after 72 hours of nothing but each other's company, I think we were all ready for some space. About 20 miles out, Oshido spoke up from the back. Corporal Restrepo, did anything feel wrong out there to you? I glanced back at him. Wrong how? Just wrong. Off. Dupree's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, but he didn't say anything. I thought about the fading tracks and the feeling of being watched. A little bit, I admitted. Why? Oshido was quiet for a moment. My dad used to tell me about things in the desert when I was a kid. What kind of things? Bautista asked. Things whose names you can't say. It's taboo to even discuss in Navajo culture. Talking about them and naming them, it's supposed to draw them closer to you. Them who? Bautista was leaning forward now. Oshido looked out the window at the desert rolling past. Well, white people call them skinwalkers. The Navajo call them something else, but I'm not supposed to say it. They're witches who wear animal skins. They can change shape, mimic voices. They're attracted to places where bad things happen, where death happens. We're at a bombing range, I said. Things die out here all the time. Yeah. Dupree spoke up. That's enough. I don't want to hear any more of this crap. We're Marines, not a bunch of superstitious. My dad saw one, Oshido said quietly, when he was stationed at 29 Palms. He told me about it one time, right before he died. He said what he saw looked like a coyote at first, but it didn't move like a coyote, and it looked at him wrong, and it followed his unit for 3 days during a training op. Said he even heard it mimicking his sergeant's voice one night, calling to him from outside the tent. The Humvee was quiet, except for the engine and the tires on asphalt. Did anything happen? I asked. One of his Marines disappeared during a night patrol. They found him 2 days later, 15 miles from where he'd vanished. But the thing is, he didn't remember a thing. Just kept saying something followed him. Oh, Christ, Bautista muttered. I don't want to hear any more of this, Dupree said, louder this time. We've got 3 more rotations scheduled. I'll not have my Marines getting worked up over folklore and bullcrap. Is that clear? Clear, Sergeant, Oshido said. But Bautista was looking at me, and I was looking at Oshido. We were all thinking about the tracks that stopped in the middle of nowhere, and those scratches 6 feet up a metal door, and about that feeling of being watched from the dark. Great, Bautista said, trying to make it sound like a joke and failing. We're stationed at a haunted checkpoint, freaking perfect. Nobody laughed. When we got back to the base, I went straight to my barracks room, wrote a letter to my girlfriend. I told her everything was fine, boring, and safe. I didn't mention the other stuff yet. I sealed the letter, put it in the outgoing mail, and tried not to think about the fact that in 4 days, we had to go back out there. Back out to the desert. The 4 days back at base should have been normal. PT at 0600 and chow hall 3 times a day. The usual Marine Corps bullcrap of standing by to stand by. I caught up on sleep, thank God, did my laundry, went to the PX for cigarettes and energy drinks. Normal garrison life, that good kind of boring. But still, something had changed. Bautista. He still joked around and still did his impressions during chow. I mean, he really nailed our company commander's speech about vehicle maintenance so perfectly that half the guys in the chow hall were dying. But I caught him staring at nothing sometimes, just sitting on his rack between PT and chow, looking at the wall with an empty expression. When I asked if he was good, he would snap back to himself and grin. Yeah, man, just thinking about all the fun we're gonna have at guard duty. But when he grinned, it didn't reach his eyes. Mail call came on day 3. I got a letter from my girlfriend. News about her job and her roommate drama, and how much she missed me. I read it twice, trying to feel something other than the distance between Florida and Arizona. Bautista got a letter too. I saw him read it. Then I watched him fold it carefully into his pocket. He didn't say what it was about, and I had no right to ask. You learn not to pry in the Marine Corps. Everyone's carrying something, after all. Oshiro spent most of the time off reading in the base library, dense philosophy books about the nature of evil. When I asked about it, he shrugged. Trying to understand things, he said, and I didn't push it. Dupree ran us through vehicle maintenance and weapons cleaning, keeping us busy, and he kept us sharp. Professional as always. But even he seemed quieter than usual. Less barking, more watching. When the duty roster came through for our second rotation at Checkpoint 7 Delta, I noticed we were all moving a little slower than normal. Nobody said much, but I could feel it. A low-grade sort of dread. Like going back to a house where something bad happened. You can't name it, and you can't point to any one thing, but your body knows. Dupree caught us hesitating while loading the Humvee. The hell is wrong with you all? Acting like I'm sending you to Fallujah. It's guard duty in the desert. Unscrew yourselves and load up. We loaded up, and we drove out. The desert looked the same as always. Empty, tan, and endless. The checkpoint sat there waiting for us like it had never been abandoned. Generators still running from the last shift rotation that had covered the gap. Basically, everything was exactly as we left it. Except it didn't feel the same this time. Colder, but not in a temperature kind of way, if that makes sense. The first night was quiet. Too quiet. I had the midnight 20400 watch, and spent most of the time staring at the security monitors, seeing nothing but empty desert, and the occasional moth fluttering past cameras. No footsteps this time. No motion sensor activations. Even so, it felt like I was waiting for something to happen. I had to remind myself that was kind of the job description here. I kept the radio volume up just to have some background noise, letting the static hiss fill the office so I wasn't so alone feeling. The second night was the same thing. Bautista didn't report anything on his watch. Oshiro reported nothing on his. We went through the motions, perimeter checks, radio checks, vehicle inspection, and then it came on night 3. Oshiro had the midnight 20400 watch. I woke up around 0200. I had to piss, and I heard him in the office. I heard the coffee maker gurgling. Typical. I used the head, thought about going back to sleep then, and decided to grab some coffee for myself. I had 4 hours until my watch, and I was restless. Might as well be awake. I was pouring coffee when Oshido came back from his perimeter walk, but his face was pale. Even in the weak light from the office desk lamp, I could tell. His hands were shaking enough that I could see it when he set his torch down. "Restrepo," he said quietly. "I need you to come outside with me." "What's wrong?" "I saw it." His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. "I freaking saw it." I grabbed my rifle and light and followed him out. The desert night was cold and clear, stars everywhere, huge empty sky. Oshido led me to the north side of the checkpoint, where the floodlights created a boundary between our little island of light and the massive darkness beyond. "There," he pointed. "About 50 yards out. I was doing the perimeter walk, and I saw something at the edge of the light range." "What was it?" "I thought it was a coyote at first." He looked at me, and then it stood up. Restrepo, it stood up like a person. It was perfectly still after, watching the checkpoint, looking at me. "How long did this happen?" "Maybe 30 seconds. It was so tall, man, but it was definitely canine-shaped. The head, the body. Eventually, it dropped to all fours and took off." We walked out to where he'd seen it. The ground was hard-packed dirt and rock. Not great for tracks, but we did find some. And what you're about to hear from me is the absolute truth. They started like normal coyote prints, like the ones I found in the first rotation. They headed towards the checkpoint, but they began to space out, lengthened. Whatever had made them had started to run, but it changed from 4-legged prints to 2 legs. I swear, it was almost human, but not entirely. The tracks were narrow and long, claw marks at the front. They ran for maybe 20 feet, then shifted back to 4 legs, then disappeared into the rocks. I crouched down, tracing one of the 2-legged prints with my light. There were 5 toes, definitely, and clawed. But the stride length was wrong, and the depth was wrong. Whatever made these was heavy and fast, and moving in ways that didn't make sense. "You seeing this?" Oshido's voice was tight. Yeah, I'm seeing it." We followed the tracks as far as we could, but they faded again into rocky ground, and we lost them. The desert stretched out in every direction, dark and empty and full of places for things to hide. I kept my rifle at low ready, my finger near the trigger guard, scanning the dark like we were on patrol in hostile territory. Because that's what it was starting to feel like. Hostile territory. Something out here was watching us and testing us. We soon went back inside. Oshido made more coffee with hands that were still shaking. I sat across from him in the office, chatting about theories, calming down with talk about philosophy, until the sun began to come up. Morning came and Dupree woke up for the day. He found us both sitting there, both awake and armed. He knew immediately something was wrong. "Report." Oshido told him everything, even the stuff that sounded crazy to him. Bautista came out of the bunk room halfway through, still in his PT shorts, listening with sleep-heavy eyes that got progressively wider. When Oshido finished, Dupree stood up, grabbed his own flashlight, and headed for the door. "Show me," he said. We took him to the tracks before the sun could erase them. Dawn light was better for seeing details. The prints were clear and undeniable. 4 legs to 2, then back again. Dupree crouched down, examining them like he was looking for an explanation that made sense. Any explanation. "Could be anything," he finally said. Maybe illegals passing through, someone wearing strange boots trying to confuse their trail. Sarge, Bautista said, just look at them. Look at the spacing on this, and how deep they are. Why would someone come out here to trick us? The tracks don't make sense, I admit that, but neither do your explanations. Could be anything, Dupree repeated, but he was staring at the two-legged prints, at the tipped points with claws. I could tell his mind was really going. He stood up then and brushed dirt off his hands. I can report it to base. Possible trespasser, tracks found. We document this, but we stay alert. He made the radio call at 0800 during the scheduled check-in, kept it professional and vague. Checkpoint 7 Delta to base. Be advised we found tracks indicating possible trespasser activity in the area. Continuing to monitor. No visual confirmation of personnel. Over. The response came back bored and staticky. Copy 7 Delta. Remain vigilant. Report any confirmed sightings. Out. That was that. The base didn't care, but they didn't really have a reason to yet. All they had to go on so far were some tracks in the desert. Probably nothing to them. Except all of us knew it wasn't nothing. On night 5, Bautista had the 0400 to 0800 watch. I was in deep sleep when he shook me awake. It was urgent, but not panicked. The sky outside was starting to lighten. Maybe 0615 or 0630. Restrepo, get up. Something happened. I sat up, instantly alert. What? I heard Dupree's voice, outside, calling for me. That woke me up completely. When? Like 10 minutes ago. I was making coffee in the kitchenette, and I heard him clear as day. He said, Bautista, come here real quick. It sounded exactly like him, man. His voice, his cadence, everything. So I went to check if he needed something and went to the bunk room. Bautista's eyes went wide. But there he was, asleep, Restrepo. Dead asleep. I woke him up too, and he said he hadn't been outside all night. And then he chewed me out. Dupree was already up, pulling on his boots and checking his rifle. Both of you, outside with me, now. We went out armed, scanning the perimeter in the early dawn light. No movement or sound so far, just wind and the usual generator noise. We walked the entire perimeter, checking every angle and every shadow, and still found nothing. It was his voice, Bautista insisted, back inside with coffee that was probably cold by now. I'm not messing with you, Sarge. It was exactly your voice. I would have bet my life it was you. Dupree sat down heavily in the office chair, setting his rifle against the desk. His face was hard to read. Part skeptical, but there was something else there. Worry, I thought. Oshiro, he called. Oshido came out, still half asleep. Tell Bautista what you told us. About the things in the desert, the native folklore. Oshido glanced at me, then at Bautista, then back to Dupree. You want me to tell him? So Oshido explained again. Skinwalkers, witches in animal skins, shapeshifters, mimics, things that wore the faces and voices of people you knew, things you didn't name or talk about. Bautista listened. I could tell he was getting nervous. So, you're saying that thing I heard was probably... We're not saying anything, Dupree cut him off. I'm saying there's folklore about this area, and I'm saying we need to be smarter than we've been. From now on, new rule. He looked at each of us in turn. Nobody goes outside alone at night. I don't care what you hear. I don't care who you think is calling you. You wake someone else first. You verify. You don't go out alone. Clear?
Clear, Sergeant,
we said in unison. And if you hear someone's voice calling you from outside, even if it sounds exactly like one of us, you verify that person's location before you respond. Do you understand what I'm telling you? We understood. something out there could sound like one of us, could mimic us, and could call to us in voices that we trusted. I couldn't believe what I was believing. And we had 3 more days in this rotation, 3 more nights. I looked at the security monitors, at all the empty deserts surrounding our little checkpoint. It was somewhere out there, and it knew our voices.
Granger knows that if you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Granger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRANGER, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
Thankfully, that rotation ended without any further incidents. The 4 days back at base after that felt different. We stuck together more, Bautista, Oshiro, and me. We'd grab chow at the same time and hit the gym together. Started doing our laundry in the same cycles. We weren't making it weird, just trying to exist in each other's orbits, like we were afraid to be alone. Like something might find us if we separated. Dupree noticed. I caught him watching us sometimes with this look. It was a good one, though. He was worried about us. I later found out he'd put in a request to get us rotated off Checkpoint 7 Delta, citing stress of isolation duty, recommending we be reassigned to normal guard rotations at the main base. The request, though, got denied within 48 hours, due to personnel shortage, budget constraints, the usual military bullcrap that means we don't care, so deal with it. At the time, he didn't tell us about that request. It was something I found out later, after everything, when I was going through some paperwork. But I think we all sensed that he was trying. He was a hard ass, but he believed in us, even if he didn't say it out loud. Mail call on day 3 brought news. Bautista got a letter from home, and I'd never seen that man so relieved. His mother's cancer treatment was showing improvement. Tumors were shrinking, and doctors were cautiously optimistic. Not a cure and not a guarantee, but it was hope that Bautista needed. He seemed to be back to his old self after that. The version of Bautista we'd known before the checkpoint started getting into our heads. The impressions came back, and the jokes, the energy that made crappy garrison life slightly less crappy. During formation, he did a spot-on impression of our company gunny losing his mind over someone's haircut, and even the staff sergeant had to turn away to hide a smile. I caught myself thinking everything was going to be okay. Maybe we'd paid our dues out there at the checkpoint at long last, and that thing would not come back. The night before our 3rd rotation, the 3 of us grabbed chow at the E-Club. It was packed. A Friday night, payday weekend. Half the base was crammed into the small dining area. We found a table in the corner, and Bautista was in rare form, telling stories about boot camp, making me and Oshiro laugh so hard I thought I'd choke on my burger. Eventually, other Marines stopped at the table, asking for different impressions and to tell that one joke again, Bautista. It was a fun time. Man, Bautista said, after eventually catching his breath. I know that place is screwed up, I know it, but I got you guys. We're gonna be all right. Oshiro, who rarely smiled, was actually grinning. Yeah, we got each other's backs. I raised my soda. No alcohol on the base, but the gesture was the same. Semper Fi, you idiots. We touched cups, and someone from another table came over with his phone. You guys mind? You look like you're having way too much fun for Marines. We posed for a picture, arms around each other's shoulders, and all of us smiling. Really smiling. That was the last time I saw Bautista truly happy. Walking back to the barracks afterward, Bautista was quiet. Eventually he spoke up, casual but not too casual. My mom said in her letter that my baby sister's birthday would have been next week. She'd have been 15. Can you believe that? The years fly by. I stopped walking. Oh, I didn't know you had a sister, man. Yeah, he kept walking, hands in his pockets. She died when we were kids. She drowned in a pool at a birthday party. I was supposed to be watching her, but I was only 12. Someone thought I was old enough to do that. Even I thought so. But I got distracted, started to screw around with some older kids, showing off, trying to be cool. By the time I noticed she was gone, by the time I found her at the bottom of the pool, it was too late. They got her out, did CPR, actually got her breathing again. But the brain damage. She lasted 3 days in the hospital. Then they turned off the machines. Oshiro and I had stopped walking. We didn't know what to say. Her name was Maria, Bautista continued. She had this laugh, man, the little kid laugh that just made everyone happy. And she always loved water. Loved swimming. That's the screwed up part. She was a good swimmer. But she dove in the deep end. She wanted to touch the bottom. And I guess she panicked or got disoriented or something. He looked up at the stars. My parents never blamed me out loud. But I know it's my fault. Bautista, I started. Ancient history. He shook it off. Literally shook his shoulders like he was shaking off a weight. Anyway, let's get some rack time. Big day tomorrow. I wanted to say something, to tell him it wasn't his fault. That he was just a kid and that accidents happened. But the words felt empty in my mouth, so I didn't say anything. We just walked back to the barracks and went to our racks to try to sleep. I should have said something. I should have known that kind of guilt doesn't go away. It lives with you. I should have known. The drive back to Checkpoint 7 Delta was fine. All four of us were a bit tense, despite the good mood from the night before. Dupree laid out the rules again before we even unloaded. 2-man watches at all times. No one outside alone even during daylight. Verify voices before responding to anyone. Weapons condition 1 at all times during night watches. He was treating this like a combat deployment now, not garrison guard duty. The first 48 hours were eerily quiet. We didn't hear any scratching and we didn't find any footprints. The security monitors showed nothing but empty desert. The motion sensors stayed dark. It was like the checkpoint had gone back to being just a building in the middle of nowhere. And I wished it would have stayed that way. We knew something was going to happen eventually. The fact we were still all on edge told us something. I think it knows we're waiting, Oshiro said on the second night, both of us on watch together in the office. Bautista was in better spirits than us. Maybe it got bored and screwed off, found some other jarheads to spook. We're probably not interesting enough anymore. He said that, but he checked the corners more often than he used to, and I noticed he was sleeping with his flashlight on. And then, night 3 happened. Oshiro and I had the midnight 20400 watch. It was around 0200. Oshiro was doing a radio check with base. Pretty much a scripted but required conversation. That's when I began to hear popping sounds. Wet pops, like joints cracking, bones breaking. It made me want to gag when I heard it. It was coming from the bunk room. I looked over at Oshiro. He'd heard it too. He was already setting down the radio handset, reaching for his M4. We moved quietly toward the bunk room, weapons up and safeties off. The door was cracked open. The lights inside were off, unusual since Bautista had been sleeping with his light. The popping sounds continued, all organic sounding and messed up. I reached the doorframe, and I peered around it carefully, not wanting to give away my position. What I saw turned my blood to ice. Bautista was in his rack, lying flat on his back, eyes wide open, completely froze up. His face was locked in an expression of absolute terror, mouth slightly open, not blinking, barely breathing. The man was paralyzed because something was crouched over him on the bed. The lower half of it was Coyote, somewhat. Backward bent legs covered in matted fur, paws with 2 long claws gripping the mattress. But the upper half was more humanoid. Torso long and narrow with very thin arms. Skin gray and slick like it was covered in mucus or pond water. It straddled Bautista's chest, crouching over him inches from his face. And its face was shifting. I watched. I couldn't move either, could barely breathe. I watched as the flesh bubbled and popped and reformed. The skull underneath seemed to be breaking and reshaping quickly, features melting like wax, then solidifying, then melting again. It cycled through a coyote's face, with an elongated snout and yellow eyes and too many teeth. Then the snout retracted, eyes moving forward and the skin smoothing. I saw a child's face emerge. A little girl, Filipino features, huge dark eyes and a sweet smile. The smile stretched wider, teeth lengthening into fangs that did not belong in a little girl's mouth. Then it laughed, high-pitched, child's laughter, mixed with animal yips, a sound that made my skin want to crawl right off of my body. The face shifted again, little girl features mixing with the coyote's snout, eyes going yellow, skin going gray and furred and smooth and human all at the same time. Then it morphed into Bautista. Perfect copy. His face, his features exact, down to the small scar on his chin from a training accident. The creature wearing Bautista's face grinned down at the real Bautista with his mouth.
Look at me, Tony. I'm you. I'm better at being you.
The thing spoke to him. It laughed, and I saw tears running down the real Bautista's face, his body still frozen up, unable to move or scream. The creature's left hand or claw reached towards him. I finally moved. Get away from him! The creature's head snapped towards me, fast. It locked eyes with me for one eternal second. Then it burst through the window in an explosion of glass and was gone. Just gone, moving too fast to track. The alarm system blared. Dupree was running from his rack, rifle up, shouting, "What happened? Report!" But Oshiro and I were staring at Bautista. He was still frozen, eyes locked on where the creature had been, body shaking violently, but otherwise completely rigid. He was locked in that moment, trapped in it. "Bautista!" Dupree was at his side, rifle lowered, checking on him. "Lance Corporal Bautista, can you hear me?" No response, even though the tears kept flowing. "Sarge," I managed. There was something on top of him, something that was wearing his face. Before Dupree could give me that "what the hell are you talking about" look, Oshiro chimed in. "It's true, Sarge. Some sort of animal thing was on top of him, changing faces." "We're getting him out of here, now." Dupree's voice was hard. It was hard to move Bautista. His body was rigid and locked up like rigor mortis in a living person. We finally got him into a sitting position in a chair, and we wrapped him in a blanket. "He's in shock," Oshiro said. "Severe shock." Dupree was already on the radio. "Maine, this is Checkpoint 7 Delta. We have a medical emergency. Need immediate case vac. Over." The response crackled back. They would be here in 45 minutes. And those 45 minutes lasted forever. The whole time we sat with Bautista, trying to talk to him, trying to bring him back. Tony, man, you're okay, I said. It's gone. We're here. You're safe. Nothing. Just a 1,000-yard stare and shaking. Oshido examined the broken window. There was glass everywhere, but no blood. The bunk where Bautista had been showed deep indentations in the mattress where something had crouched. 4 distinct pressure points, too far apart to be human hands. When the vehicle finally arrived, the corpsman took one look at Bautista and went pale. Christ, what happened to him? Possible psychological break, Dupree said. We found him like this. They loaded Bautista up, and we watched as they drove away with our friend. Pack it up. We're going back with him, Dupree said. Sarge, we still have 24 hours on rotation. Do I look like I give a crap? He rounded on me. I'd never seen him so angry before. We're done. Pack your crap. We're leaving. That's an order. I did as he said. Bautista was in medical for 3 days. They kept him under observation in the base hospital. I visited during that time. He was sitting up in bed, staring at the wall, not moving. When I said his name, he didn't reply. He just seemed to be watching something that I couldn't see. By day 4, something changed. When Oshido and I visited that afternoon, Bautista was sitting up, eating Jell-O and smiling. Hey, what's up, guys? Like we'd just run into each other at the PX. Like nothing happened. Tony, man, are you okay? I couldn't keep the uncertainty out of my voice. Yeah, dude, I'm good. He spooned more Jell-O into his mouth. The docs say I had some kind of panic attack or something. Embarrassing, yeah, but I'm sorry I freaked you guys out. Oshido and I exchanged a look. Do you remember what happened? Bautista's smile flickered for a second. I remember waking up and feeling like I couldn't move. That's about it. Everything else is pretty fuzzy. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Probably for the best, right? We talked for another 20 minutes. He was so animated, so back to his old self. But I did notice his hands shook a bit when he held his water cup. And when I shifted position and my shadow fell across the window behind him, he flinched. He kept his eyes on us, on the door, anywhere but that window. From what we could gather from him, he didn't remember the creature clearly, or he was lying about it. I couldn't tell which it was, or which explanation was worse than the other. Dupree pulled me and Oshido aside the next day. We met in his cramped office. He closed the door and gestured for us to sit. Bautista is off checkpoint duty, permanently. His voice left no room for argument. I don't care what the docs clear him for. I don't care what he says. I'm putting in paperwork to keep him on base assignments only. He's not going back out there. Good, Oshido said quietly. Whatever that thing is, Dupree continued. It targeted him specifically, from what you two told me, and I want to know why. Oshido eventually spoke. His voice was careful. I've heard that skinwalkers can sense weakness, emotional pain. They're drawn to it like blood in the water. With his mom being sick, his sister, well, he's suffering from a lot. My stomach knotted up at the image of that thing's face twisting into a visage of a little girl. I knew then, and I knew now, that face was likely his little sister, Maria. Christ, I muttered as I remembered. Christ indeed, Dupree said. So he's done. I'm not sending him back out there. Later on, I saw Bautista and Dupree together. I was walking past the company office and I saw them through the window. Bautista standing at attention, Dupree shaking his head firmly. Later, Dupree told me that Bautista had asked to come back. He wanted another shot at it. Almost sounded like he wanted to face it again. Request denied, Dupree had told him. You're staying on base and that's final. I saw Bautista later that day in the chow hall. He was sitting alone, pushing his food around his tray. When I sat down across from him, he looked up and smiled. Hey, man. Hey, you doing all right? Yeah, I'm fine. He took a drink of water. Instantly, I noticed the shaking was still there. So Dupree told you he won't let me back. Look, it's probably for the better, I said. He nodded. Yeah, I feel like I left something out there, you know? Like I had something to finish. You don't owe that thing anything, Tony. And you don't owe us anything. Maybe. He pushed his tray away. Maybe. Dupree let us know that 4th rotation started in 2 days. We'd be getting a replacement, a PFC they called Croak. The guy was from West Virginia, named Daniel Croak. That's all Dupree really knew so far. And Dupree, Oshiro, and I agreed that we would not tell him anything about this skinwalker. Back at the checkpoint, Oshiro and I had the midnight 20400 watch. Around 0130, we were sitting in the office. He was reading one of his philosophy books, of course. I was doing log entries. I looked up to ask him something, and I stopped. His head was slumped forward, chin to chest. The book was still in his hands, but his grip was loose. Oshiro? Nothing. Hey, Oshiro. Still nothing. This man was deeply asleep or something. I stood up and walked over, shaking his shoulder. Hey, Oshiro, wake up. His breathing was slow and deep, like he'd been drugged. This was not normal sleep. Oshiro never fell asleep on the night watch. He was the most disciplined of all of us. I shook him harder. Oshiro! He didn't even twitch. I was about to go wake Dupree when I heard footsteps on the gravel outside. I grabbed my M4, moving quietly to the window. The floodlights were on, and I could see clearly. Something was walking toward the checkpoint on 2 legs, hunched forward, arms long, knuckles nearly dragging the ground. The lower body was Coyote, those distinctive bent legs, digitigrade stance, and a tail. The upper body was more humanoid, but everything was stretched and twisted. It moved like stop-motion animation, like it was moving in frames and not in smooth real-life motions. It stepped fully into the light, maybe 20 yards from the building. Then it stopped, straightened up, then looked directly at the window where I was standing. The face was Bautista's, but wrong. It was all meshed together, like a big fleshy ball of Play-Doh with the Coyote's features. Bautista's eyes, nose, and mouth, but a partially elongated snout and pointed ears. There was fur around the jaw and cheeks, matted and dark, and the thing was smiling. It tilted its head at me and smiled even more. And I watched as it seemed to be laughing. It waved with a clawed hand, and something inside me snapped. Rage overrode fear. I began cursing as I raised my M4, flicking the safety off, and I fired 3 rounds through that window. The glass shattered. The creature sprinted away impossibly fast, dropping to all 4s, gone into the darkness in less than a second. It got what it wanted. Of course, the gunfire woke everyone. Dupree burst out of the bunk room, rifle up. "The hell are you shooting at?" Croak stumbled out behind him. "Are we under attack?" Oshiro was still slumped in his chair, and he wouldn't wake up. I started to shake him again, my ears ringing from the shots. "It was here. It had Bautista's face, and it was laughing at us. Dupree checked outside. Nothing visible, no blood or tracks either. What are you talking about? I explained what I'd seen carefully. Dupree looked at Oshiro, still deeply asleep despite the gunfire. Why won't he wake up? We tried for about 5 more minutes, and only then did Oshiro finally start to rouse. He was groggy and disoriented, like he'd been underwater. What happened? You fell asleep on watch. Oshiro looked alarmed. I did? I remember sitting down and then... He trailed off, confused, even a bit scared. That's never happened to me before. I think I knew what had done it. That thing out there had somehow put him to sleep, so I would be alone to witness it. Why it wanted me to see, I don't know. Dupree was on the radio, talking about weapons discharge, but the situation was under control. But the voice on the other end stopped him and requested some privacy. Dupree sent us from the room. 5 minutes passed. Me, Croak, Oshiro waited in the main office. But then the door opened. Dupree's face was solemn. Pack your gear. We're going back to base now. The drive back was suffocating. Dupree gripped the steering wheel tight, white-knuckling it all the way back. We pulled onto the main base around 0700 and were immediately directed to the company office. The captain was there, looking somber like Dupree. He asked Dupree to step aside privately. Oshiro and I waited outside. Through the window, I could see Dupree sitting down, putting his head in his hands. When he finally came out, his face was blank, shut down. Restrepo, Oshiro, I've got some news. He led us to an empty classroom and sat us down. Then he took a breath before he started. I got the call at 0300. Lance Corporal Bautista was found dead in his mother's garage during leave. The police estimate time of death to be 0200 Pacific. Apparent. Himself while his mother was at a doctor's appointment. The room was spinning. I couldn't breathe. Oshiro's voice came from far away. It killed him. That thing killed him. The official report says, Dupree said, there won't be any further investigation. It showed up as him. I was on my feet. It wore his face. It was mocking us just now. And he was dying. Alone. That's all I could say. The creature had appeared at the exact moment Bautista had died. Wearing his face. Laughing with his voice. Waving at me like it was all a joke. It wanted me to see. To know. That it had won. Oshiro was right. Skinwalkers are real. And once they know you, once you've seen them and survived, they don't forget about it. They just wait. And I won't be forgetting either. Not about it, and not about Bautista. Semper Fi, Tony. I'm sorry we couldn't save you. I'm sorry we let it steal your face.
Some people just don't get it. That Squarespace isn't just for websites. You can get a domain from Squarespace too. It's kind of like how your parents don't get how you make a living off your art, but you do. And with a domain like existentialglitter.com and a website from Squarespace, you can build a brand for yourself, grow your client list, and continue to confuse your parents all in one place. Get yours before it's gone with offer code MAKEITREAL for 10% off your domain.
Have you ever been in a game and
This happened a couple years ago, and a few months after COVID had started. I started to work from home while my wife was HR at a local chain grocery store. We have a daughter together, who at the time was 7. I was sitting at my desk, which was in the living room downstairs, and my daughter had been out of school for a few minutes, and I could hear her playing upstairs. I have home security cameras set up to an app on my phone that can see a live feed, though I never really feel the need to use them, as I trust when my daughter's in school, she's actually paying attention. Plus, my job is very stressful sometimes, and I can't really shift my focus most days. My daughter comes downstairs to grab some snacks, and I tell her I'll be done in a couple hours. She goes back upstairs, and all is well and normal. I'm in the middle of writing a report when I hear my daughter talking, which wasn't too weird, until I hear a faint voice talking back. I know it wasn't my daughter's voice, it sounded like a man. I sit there in shock for a few seconds, trying to think if maybe I was just out of it and it was actually one of my coworkers, but I could have sworn that the voice came from upstairs. I excused myself from the Zoom call and proceeded upstairs to my daughter's room. I knocked, and she told me to come in. I asked what she was doing, and she said she was just playing on her iPad. Then I asked who she was talking to, and she says I don't know. That wasn't an uncommon answer for my daughter, as she pretty much says I don't know to anything that she doesn't want to talk about. I didn't think much of it, but I still had an uneasy feeling. I looked around her room real quick, and didn't see anybody, and nothing looked out of place, so I went back to work, and that was that. The rest of the day was pretty normal. My wife came home, we ate dinner, played some games with our daughter, and then it was time for bed. I thought about telling my wife the entire day, but kept fighting with myself, as I had no clue what I really heard, and I kept reasoning with myself that maybe it was just one of my coworkers, or some other voice from one of their screens, or maybe even the game that my daughter was playing on her iPad. I had no reason to believe that there was someone else upstairs, as I had a view of her room from my desk, and I even went up there and checked. I decided that if I heard anything again, I'd tell my wife, but I didn't want to freak her out for no reason. We both tucked in our daughter and said our goodnights, then went to bed. That night, I had terrible dreams, and I kept going in and out of sleep, hearing voices and feeling pressure on all parts of my body. A kind of sleep paralysis, maybe. In these states of being sort of awake, I could almost make out a male voice speaking, but I couldn't really make any sense of the words he was saying. I awoke in a state of panic, as I realized the sun was coming up. I noticed my wife was already up and getting ready for work. "Did you hear anything last night?" I asked her, and she replied no, which filled me with relief. She asked me why, and I told her that I think I just experienced some weird kind of sleep paralysis, which I'd never had before. She made sure I was okay before logging our daughter into school for the day and then heading out. I get ready for work myself, as I only have about an hour to eat breakfast and shower and try and forget last night's nightmare. It's Friday, and I'm just ready for the weekend. The day treads on, as slow as humanly possible, and I can barely even stay awake. I doze off for a few minutes on my break, before hearing my daughter come downstairs. She asked me if she can go outside, and I said not until I'm out of work. She's visibly upset, but she knows the rules. I get through the last hour of work and go upstairs to check on her. I knocked on her door and she opens it with a book in her hand. "Did you still want to go outside?" I asked. She said no, not anymore, and that she just wanted to read. I felt a bit of relief, as I really didn't want to do anything anyways, as I was so tired. I went back downstairs and turned on the TV. My wife wasn't going to be home for another half hour, so that gave me time to nap. Since it was a Friday, I knew she'd want to stay up late because we both had the weekends off, and our daughter always goes to bed by 8 or 9, so that was pretty much the only alone time we'd get. I dozed off for a bit until I was awoken by my wife coming in through the front door. She said hi, and our daughter comes running down to hug her. The rest of the night goes on. We have dinner, watch a movie, and play some games until we eventually tuck our daughter in. The nap really helped, as my wife and I didn't go to bed until probably midnight, which is a record for us. I climbed into bed, ready to fall asleep. My wife and I laid there for a while, and as I'm on the brink of sleep, that's when my wife asks me something. She asked me if someone was here earlier, and a little freaked out, I said no, then asked her why she asked. She explained that when she was pulling into the driveway, there was a car parked at the curb right outside of our house, and right when she pulled in, they drove away. I told her that no one stopped by, and I had made it very clear to everyone that I knew that no one was allowed over because we were really trying to social distance due to the start of COVID. She sat there for a few seconds, and then she said it was probably just the neighbors, and that she thought she saw that same car there on Monday, and maybe even sometime last week. She jokes that I better not be having any women over, and then we finally go to bed. Thankfully, I slept like a rock that night. Saturday comes and goes, perfectly normal. It wasn't until Sunday that my daughter really started to worry me. We were eating dinner when out of nowhere she asks us what a machete is. I looked over at my wife, who looks just as concerned as I am. My mind is moving, trying to remember if we'd watched anything or talked about anything in regards to any kind of weapon, but I couldn't think of anything. In a calm tone, my wife asks her where she heard that word. She says she forgot, and I couldn't help but feel like she just lied straight to our faces. Something wasn't right about this, and she's a good kid and never really lies. If something was wrong, you'd tell us, right? I asked, just hoping she'd open up a little bit. But she declined and assured us everything was great, and she said that she's made a good friend, and her teacher's nice, and online school's going well. I had mixed emotions, sort of hating myself for wishing something was wrong so that she could just tell me. I decided to respect her boundaries though, and so does my wife. The rest of the night, nothing else was brought up. My wife and I put our daughter to bed, and after closing her door, we headed back downstairs to sit on the couch. I had this horrible feeling in my gut that I've had all night, and pretty much all week. A feeling that's been festering so long that I decided to just tell my wife everything. From the voice I thought I heard to the dream and the machete. Come to think of it, my daughter's been spending more time in her room than usual. Ever since COVID started, she used to want to be around me and her mother all the time. She was an only child who couldn't see her friends anymore except through a screen, so it made sense that she'd want to spend time with us. But now, her spending so much time alone all of a sudden felt really strange. I tell my wife everything I've been feeling. I think I was venting for maybe 20 minutes because I had so much on my chest. She looks at me with a blank stare and then looks down, and I can tell that she feels something similar. She looks up at me and she's on the verge of tears. Before she can get a word out, she just starts crying. I hold her for a while as we both sit there, and getting everything out had just made my mind go blank. But then I hear it again, a voice coming from my daughter's room, the same voice I thought I heard before. I bolt up from the sofa, not even gauging my wife's reaction, and I race up to my daughter's room, swinging the door open. And there she is, sitting on the edge of her bed, just staring at me in horror, as if I'm the one that was intruding on her and her friend, and not the other way around. I was scared and anxious, and I just yelled, "Who's there?" There was no answer. I yelled to my wife to call the police while I'm scouring my daughter's room. I look under her bed and in her closet and under piles of stuffed animals, and there's nothing. I checked out the window to see if anyone was down there, and there was no one. This didn't make any sense, and that's when I heard my wife ask my daughter something that turned my entire world upside down. "Is it coming from the camera?" I turn around, and my daughter hesitantly nods her head. The camera. My fear turns into complete rage as I grab a stool and dismantle it. I tried to keep my cool so as to not scare my daughter, but the thought of some stranger talking to her through a camera that I willingly installed in her room was unbearable. I was angry, disgusted, and heartbroken, and that's when my doorbell rang, and I hear a man yell, "Police." I answer the door, and I explain everything to them, but they don't really seem surprised at all. They explain that this thing happens a lot when security cameras don't have a ton of those security features that you get with the more expensive ones. Apparently, hackers can see through it and even talk to you, which was obviously news to me. They asked to speak to my daughter, and what she told them was soul-crushing. This had been going on for almost 2 weeks now, apparently, and the voice had become my daughter's friend. They had talked to her after school and asked her about everything she liked, and would tell her that they liked that stuff too. This voice learned what time I got off work and what time my wife would get home, and basically our entire schedule as a family. They learned my daughter's school schedule and her friends' names, and how she hadn't seen them in a while, and how she felt like she didn't have any friends anymore and was lonely. This voice had been learning everything about my daughter right inside of my home and right under my nose. They had preyed on her, and the fact that she was lonely, and used that to their advantage. Everything was starting to make sense. The voice I heard was real, and the dream I had about the voice wasn't even a dream at all. And this just made me wonder if my daughter wanting to go outside was just to play with this stranger, which means that my wife was right about the car outside of our house. The one that was there on Friday, and apparently Monday and last week too. This voice had been talking to my daughter for a whole 2 weeks, and I only noticed a couple days ago. I felt sick to my stomach and wondered why she wouldn't tell us, why she felt like she needed to protect him. The officer had the same question, and my daughter was silent for a bit, until he assured her that everything was going to be okay. She said that the voice told her that their friendship had to be a secret, and it was only between them. And if she had told anyone about them talking, that someone was going to hurt him with a machete, and they would never be able to talk or play again. I looked at my wife, who looks rightfully horrified, and I know she feels just as guilty as I do. The policeman tells my daughter that no one's gonna get hurt and not to worry. Then he gestures me over to the side as his partner and my wife console our daughter. The officer's face is noticeably more worried than before. He claims usually when they've gotten these types of calls in the past, it's been pranks and nothing malicious ever comes out of it. But this case is different, and they want to take protective measures. He advises us to take all the cameras down, and says if possible, we should stay at a family member's house, or because of COVID, maybe a separate hotel room for a few days, while they patrol the area and try to look for a car that matches the description my wife gave them. After that night, my brother took us in for a couple weeks, and we kept in contact with the police for a few months. But unfortunately, nothing ever came of the incident. It took a while after that whole thing to feel safe in my home again, and I know my wife feels the same way. But we're both just happy that our daughter doesn't know the true intentions of the man behind the voice, and we probably won't tell her until she's much, much older.